In a previous video, you learned about something called mitosis, and mitosis is a form of cell division. And what this means is that cells basically go through this process in which they split in two in order to make two new cells. Now, meiosis is also a form of cell division, but it happens in different cells and the outcome is different as well. So essentially, mitosis and meiosis are both associated with cell division, which is the process of one cell making new cells, but there are some significant differences between the two that we are going to address in this lesson. So before we get too far into talking about meiosis, let's do a bit of a review on sexual reproduction. What happens in sexual reproduction is that a female produces an egg, and a male produces a sperm. During fertilization, the genetic information that's in the sperm gets transferred into the egg. And then the fertilized egg becomes known as a zygote. Now the zygote starts to go through embryonic development, and embryonic development happens through a lot of mitotic divisions happening very quickly. So one cell becomes two cells become four cells become eight, etc., etc. So 8 cells become 16 cells turns into 32. And this keeps happening until you ultimately end up with trillions of cells producing a human. Now, there are a few things to note about the DNA or the genetics associated with this. So first of all, the egg has 23 chromosomes packaged inside the egg. So the DNA in the egg is packaged as 23 chromosomes. Same thing with the sperm. The sperm also has 23 chromosomes. When they come together in the zygote, you end up with 23 pairs of chromosomes. So you end up with 23 chromosomes that came from the egg and 23 chromosomes that came from the sperm. Now, we can say that this is 46 total chromosomes, but it's better to think in terms of pairs. So the zygote has 23 pairs of chromosomes. So as this zygote is going through embryonic development, so that's what essentially all of this is. These mitotic divisions are embryonic development. And what's happening at each of these arrows is mitosis. And if you recall from mitosis, what happens is that the DNA gets copied and then each new cell gets a complete copy of the DNA. So after the zygote goes through the first round of mitosis, each of the daughter cells is going to have 23 of those chromosomes from mom, originally from mom, and 23 that originally came from dad. Same thing with the next group of cells. And I'm going to switch over to just drawing these as bar-shaped chromosomes because I'm running out of room. So once again, there are 23 of these kind of paired chromosomes. So every single cell has a complete set of chromosomes. Same thing with the next round of mitosis. All of these cells is going to have 23 pairs of chromosomes, or 46 total chromosomes. And this keeps happening. So essentially every single cell in your body has a complete set of the genetic material that you got from your parents. So all of the cells in your body have 46 total chromosomes. There are some exceptions to this rule. For example, your red blood cells, as they mature, they actually lose their genetic material. But for the most part, the majority of the cells in your body have a complete set of 46 total chromosomes. So once you reach puberty and you start producing your own sex cells, how do your cells go from having 46 total chromosomes back down to having only 23? Well, the answer to that question is meiosis. So, what happens during puberty is that you have these specialized cells in your body in these structures called the gonads. And the gonads include ovaries in females and testes in males. And what happens is that you have these specialized cells called stem cells that exist in these structures. And during puberty, those cells start to go through this process of meiosis. And if you're male, those cells are going to divide in order to form sperm. If you're female, those stem cells are going to divide in order to form eggs. And so meiosis is the answer to the question of how we go from having 46 chromosomes back down to having 23, because the stem cells have 46 chromosomes, but the egg or the sperm that are produced during meiosis end up with only 23 chromosomes. So this slide here reiterates what I talked about on the previous slide, that human body cells have 23 pairs of chromosomes for 46 total. So the vast majority of the cells in your body, with some exceptions, have these 46 total chromosomes, which are arranged as 23 pairs. And so where do these pairs of chromosomes come from? Well, they come from sex, really. So they come from the fact that your parents had sex. So approximately 9 months before you were born, your parents had sex, and your dad took a sperm with a package of 23 chromosomes, gave it to your mom, and that sperm fused with a package of 23 chromosomes that her body created in the form of an egg. And what you ended up with were these 46 total chromosomes that we can talk about in the sense of pairs. So in mitosis, so remember mitosis was the cell division that we talked about in a previous lesson. So in mitosis, the cells start with 46 chromosomes and they end with 46 chromosomes. So remember that the daughter cells in mitosis are identical to the parent cell. So whatever the parent cell starts out with, the DNA gets an exact copy, and then the daughter cells end up with a full set of DNA. So how do these sex cells, so eggs and sperm, how do they end up with 23 total chromosomes? So it's important to note that these are total chromosomes. They're not paired up anymore. And the process that takes the 46 chromosomes and separates them down into these cells with 23 chromosomes is meiosis. So it's important to note that these sex cells have to have 23 chromosomes, at least in humans. Now, other species have different numbers of chromosomes, and so there would be a specific number that would be necessary for, say, a frog or a turtle. But for humans, we have to have 23 chromosomes in our gametes. And when we talk about gametes, these are just our specialized sex cells, which include sperm in males and eggs in female. So why do these gametes have to have only 23 chromosomes? Well, by definition, humans have 46 total chromosomes in their genome. So in the majority of the cells in their body, they have to have 46 total chromosomes. So if we were to take an egg with 23 chromosomes and combine it with a sperm with 23 chromosomes, we end up with a zygote with 46 total chromosomes. Now let's say that this individual here, so this individual, let's say it does not go through meiosis, and instead this ends up being an egg. So let's say that now we have an egg with 46 chromosomes in it. Now let's say that it combines with a sperm that also has 46 chromosomes. Now we would end up with a zygote that has 92 chromosomes. And this causes a problem. So this would actually not develop properly. By definition, humans have 46 chromosomes. If something happens, and this does happen sometimes we'll talk about some problems that occur during meiosis and sexual reproduction, but there are instances where zygotes end up with maybe an extra chromosome or missing a chromosome, and it causes problems. And most often, those zygotes don't develop properly, and it results in a pregnancy that does not occur, or if a pregnancy occurs, it might end in miscarriage. So, one example of a situation in which an extra chromosome can actually cause problems has to do with a condition known as Down syndrome. And Down syndrome is also known as trisomy 21. What happens is that individuals with Down syndrome end up with 3 copies of chromosome number 21. And they should only have 2 copies. So instead of having 46 total chromosomes, they have 47 total. And Down syndrome is actually a situation in which the fetus will still develop, but there are long term physical and cognitive disabilities that come along with that. In other cases, if there's an extra chromosome or a lack of chromosome, then that fetus would probably not even develop to begin with. So this is why it's important for meiosis to be able to take those 46 chromosomes and essentially divide them back into 23 so that generation after generation we maintain that humans have these 46 chromosomes. In the previous lesson, when we talked about mitosis, we were talking about a process that happens in the majority of the cells in the body. So the general body cells are called the somatic cells, and somatic cells are basically everything except the sex cells. Meiosis, however, only occurs in structures known as gonads. So in females, this would be the ovaries. And in males, it would be the testes. And in these specific structures, there are these specialized stem cells that are also called germ cells. And these are the cells that go through meiosis in order to produce the gametes. And remember, gametes refer to the sex cells, which are also just known as eggs and sperm. So in females would produce eggs and males would produce sperm. So meiosis only occurs in these specialized structures, and it only occurs with these specialized cells that produce eggs and sperm. Mitosis happens pretty much everywhere else. There are a couple of new terms we need to introduce as we talk about meiosis, and those terms are diploid and haploid. And this condition is kind of just generally known as ploidy. And ploidy has to do with the number of sets of chromosomes. So di means 2, and so diploid means that cells have 2 sets of chromosomes. So we've talked about these pairs of chromosomes before, and it's one reason why I kind of recommend that instead of thinking in terms of absolute number of chromosomes, it's better to think of it in terms of pairs. So if you remember, when you were formed, so your parents had sex, and you had the egg and the sperm, and remember that you got a complete set of these kind of 23 like linear chromosomes from your mom, and then you got 23 of these linear chromosomes from your dad. And so the zygote, which was essentially your kind of first baby picture, if you will, so this is where you first started happening, what happens is that you got a set of chromosomes from your mom and you got a set of chromosomes from your dad. Now, these 23 pairs of chromosomes, we can write this out as essentially you have chromosome number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, etc., all the way down to number 23. And what happens is that you got a chromosome number 1 from your mom, a chromosome number 2 from your mom, a chromosome number 3 from your mom, a chromosome number 4 from your mom, chromosome number 5, etc., all the way down to the 23rd chromosome. Same thing with your dad. You ended up with a chromosome number 1 from your dad, a chromosome number 2 from your dad, chromosome number 3 from dad, 4, 5, all the way down to your 23rd chromosome. Now, these chromosomes that you get from your parents, these are called homologous chromosomes, all right? So these 2 chromosome number 1s, this is a pair of chromosomes. We also call them homologous chromosomes. And if these paired homologous chromosomes are present, we can say that the cell is diploid because there are two sets of chromosomes present. Now, the reason why we think of these chromosomes in pairs is that they have similar genetic information on them. So your chromosomes contain genes. So let's say that chromosome number 1, and I'm just making this up, but let's say that chromosome number 1 carries the genetic information for eye color. So you actually get 2 copies of genes that determine what your eye color is going to be, but you might get some slightly different variations. For example, from your mom, you might get a copy of the gene that says you're going to have brown eyes. And from your dad, you might get a copy of the gene that says you're going to have blue eyes. You're still getting information on how to make eye color. It's just that you're getting 2 different kind of recipes on how to make that eye color. So these homologous chromosomes are similar, but they're not identical. So homo technically means same, but in this case, you should think of them as similar, but not identical. All right, so when we talked about mitosis, all right, so our good friend mitosis, during mitosis, you went from having a parent cell that was diploid to having daughter cells that were also diploid. So we didn't really introduce these terms there because it was the same. So in mitosis, you start out with a diploid cell and you end up with diploid daughter cells. Now, in meiosis, what happens is that you start out with a diploid cell and you ultimately end up with haploid daughter cells. And so haploid means that there's only one set. So haploid means basically one set of chromosomes, which would be 23 total. So not 46 total, but 23 total chromosomes that would be found in these sex cells. All right, so let's go over these terms again. So haploid means that there is one set of chromosomes. And you really only find this condition in the gametes. So you would only find a haploid condition in the eggs and sperm. So in humans, this would mean that there would be 23 total chromosomes. Now, diploid means that there are 2 sets of chromosomes. So instead of saying 2 sets of chromosomes, we could say that there are paired chromosomes. Now, diploid situation is going to be found in basically all of your somatic cells. So somatic cells are just all the body cells except for the gametes. So essentially all cells except the gametes. So in humans, this would mean that these diploid cells would have 23 pairs of chromosomes, which is the same thing as saying that there are 46 total chromosomes.